Hi, Eurielle. Thanks so much for coming and joining me on the Mary-Jess Meets podcast. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm really good, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, I'm all right, thank you. I must say, I love your backdrop. I've got this screen mainly because I'm lazy. I can hide the stuff behind. But those pillars, they look very grand. I like that.
Yeah, well, I'm up here at my parents' house at the moment. I've been up here since the lockdown was announced in the UK. So this is the music room in the house. It was actually the last room that my parents did up. It used to be called the junk room, and I used to have to come in here as a child. It was freezing cold because there was no heating in here at the time, and the piano that you can probably just about see behind me. That was the piano that I was learning on as a child.
Wow.
And I used to have to turn this gas heater on next to me just to keep me warm while I did my practice.
That's dedication
Uh,
because your fingers must have been
yeah.
freezing while you're trying to.
Yeah, and my fingers were uncooperative on the piano at the best of times. Uh, so yes, but the pillars actually were put in as one of the last features when the room was done up. So they weren't always there, actually, but yeah.
Yeah. No, they look lovely. It looks like a very nice room, and it's so great to have a piano like that. I guess especially during lockdown as well, you can keep yourself occupied. And well, I know you've been crazy busy during lockdown, haven't you?
Yeah, yeah. I actually, to be honest, I have barely touched it since I came up, which is such a shame. But I mean, I just, I'm always so flat out that it's hard for me to kind of find time to switch off and actually just be able to sit and, play something or sing something for pleasure. Shame, but yeah, that's how it
Yeah.
is.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. I know exactly what you're saying. Because independent artists, we have to just do so many different things that I never imagined I'd
Yeah,
have to do when I was going around saying, I'm going to be a singer. And it was just things I never thought would be part of that job description. But
yeah,
it means
yeah.
that you're constantly thinking about the next thing and constantly working on things, constantly glued to a
Hmm.
computer. And I know that because of the amount of remote work that you do normally anyway, it's just carried on like that through lockdown, hasn't it? Because a lot of
Yeah,
people have
yeah.
been struggling losing live work, myself included. I've lost a lot of live work, whereas I'm so envious of all of your online stuff. It's just amazing, that empire that you've built for yourself.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I've been very lucky in that most of my income comes from streaming rather than live performance. Um, Fortunately for me, so far I haven't really been affected at all, and my work's actually, as you were saying, just carried on as before. And if anything, I've just been, busier than ever. Yeah, I've been very lucky like that for sure.
So what have you been keeping busy with during lockdown? Have you been recording? Is it like new album stuff? Is it other projects?
So I mean, I had a plan for this year, which was I thought I was going to divide it into two halves, and for the first half of the year, I wanted to focus on doing all the kind of behind closed doors, continued promotion of my last album, which I released in December last year. And that's, things like all the stuff that the public doesn't see. So after the actual public release campaign, that's, all over social media and everything, of course, as you'll know, there follows afterwards a whole extra series of tasks that you have to do to promote a release, like reaching out to music supervisors for sync opportunities, sending the music to anybody who represents you for sync, all the admin, the registrations, just a never-ending sort of list of tasks that follow any release. And so I wanted to devote the first 6 months of this year to that mostly. And then my plan was to start focusing on my next album in the second half of this year. So, I mean, that alone, involves a degree of planning because, I've got to obviously um, work out who I'm doing that with, as in who I'm going to be writing the songs with. Again, I'm hoping, it will be the same guy as my last album, but he's a soundtrack composer, so it partly depends on what other jobs and everything he's got going on at the time too. as to whether he can commit to a whole album, because, you know, as you'll know, it's a really big commitment to pull that kind of project together. And also, you know, just working out other forthcoming releases that I've got coming up. So that next album I'm hoping to release maybe next year. But also, you know, there's a couple of other things, like a video game song I recorded about I don't know, God no, when was that? 2018 or something, 2017? Quite a long time ago now. That kind of shows, underlines just, you know, how busy I've been over the last few years, that we're only just getting to a stage where I've been able to say to the guy, the composer who wrote that song, oh, you know, I think I've got time to maybe focus on the release of that track now, even though we recorded it several years ago. So yeah, sorry about that. But that is one of the forthcoming releases that I'm working on, and I'm also thinking of doing something with one of the Lord of the Rings Tolkien kind of songs that I've done in the past as well.
Oh, cool. Doing something with it in terms of, I'm guessing it's released already, so what are you thinking?
Yeah, I was going to I haven't actually revealed anything about it, so I was going to keep that quiet for now.
Okay.
Actually, but I mean, yeah, I can say, you know, I'm thinking of taking one of the songs that I've already done previously and sort of reworking it and re-releasing that as well. So
Oh, cool.
yeah, that's on the horizon as well. So three releases: new album, that video game song, and that Tolkien inspired song as well.
Would that be a standalone project, or would that be part of the new album that
Yeah.
you're messaging?
Yes. Yeah. The Tolkien song would be, yeah, like a separate thing to my album, because my albums are, I want to keep them now as very personal things. All the songs in them have to be very personal to me. So obviously, you know, a Tolkien song kind of sits separately to that. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, when I was listening to Goodbye Butterfly, your last release, I really did get the feeling that it was a very personal album. And I love that you really stress the importance of having original material. When did you start feeling that that was really important?
I think right from the beginning, to be honest, even before I actually came into the recording industry. It's actually one of the reasons why, you know, I had a choice when I was at the Royal Academy of Music. I could have exited the usual door, which is to go into the strict kind of classical route, which everybody else in my year did. And for example, the mezzo soprano was recently on Cardiff Singer of the World.
I love that show.
Yeah. You know, stunning voice. So I'm not surprised she ended up on there. And also she's Welsh too, so she was representing Wales. But oh, sorry, that's my parents' clock. I forgot to stop that. It goes ding on the half hour and ding 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 on the hours as well. Anyway, yeah, they all followed the sort of strict classical path, whereas I didn't fancy the prospect of being constrained by, much as obviously, you know, all the classical repertoire that's been written by, you know, like Mozart, Brahms, Wagner, you know, all those amazing composers is stunning, and I love it, and I'll always love it. I didn't fancy a career where I had to sing music that was always written by somebody else, and the music never changed because obviously it was written and it's never changed since. I just thought, I don't really fancy that. And the classical was pretty kind of strict in a lot of ways as well. And I just thought, I think I want to be more free than that and make my own music. So, you know, when I was introduced to Ryan Lauder, that's his producer name, to do my first album, we just started writing original material straight away. There wasn't even a question of, shall we make an album of cover songs, you know, or songs that have been like, you know, Ave Maria, etc., the usual kind of classical standards. that just wasn't even on the cards. Literally just straight away we started writing original music, and I don't think that was because I actually said to Ryan, you know, I don't want to sing anyone else's music, I just want to write my own. I can't even remember having a discussion like that, but for some reason we just went straight into writing original stuff. So
Wow.
but I started to realize over the years the importance, I think, of focusing on original material, because a lot of artists, as you'll know, artists in our genre and other genres, they do lots and lots of cover songs, and some artists almost exclusively just cover songs, and they will take whichever song is hot right now and they'll cover it. I mean, I don't know if you watched The Witcher. I never watched The Witcher. I can hear lots of boo hiss coming from various quarters now because I didn't watch that. But
Well, I haven't watched it either, so it's coming to both of us.
Yeah. But that song, you probably heard of it, Toss a Coin to Your Witcher.
I've heard of it. I don't think I've actually heard it myself.
Yeah, I'd heard it, I don't know, reported about in the media or something, because it was obviously, a really popular song as soon as this episode had aired with that song in it. And I thought, oh, I know what's going to happen next. Every YouTuber and their dog is going to cover that song. And, sure enough, that's exactly what happened. And I just sort of, my shoulders just slumped because, they build up a following very quickly by doing that. But in my opinion, it's a very fickle following because the fans are following them. They're more interested in the song they're covering than they are the artists themselves. So as soon as the song goes out of as soon as everyone forgets about it, inevitably is the case with most popular songs nowadays. They're popular sort of when they're first released, and then after a while, everyone just forgets about the song and moves on.
Yeah.
That's what the fans do as well. And if you as a cover artist just stop producing those songs, I think, there's a high chance that your fans would also just move on to some other cover artist who's covering the latest, greatest hot song. And I've also noticed that artists who focus on cover songs, they have to produce about twice the amount of material that somebody like me does, who's focusing on original music, for the same amount of followers. So yeah, there's a few signs for me there that suggest, although focusing on original material it sets you up for a longer, slower build of your career.
Yeah.
It builds, I think, a more loyal, devoted fan base, because I know that anybody who follows me is following me because the songs are, particularly as I've got older as well, and matured, grown up, they know that the songs are all about me. They're very personal to me, including the content of them. Nobody's writing the songs for me. Yes, I have co-writers, but I'm generally saying, okay, I want to write a song about X on this concept, and then we work together on that. So yeah, I think original material for me is the way to go. It's a longer, slower, harder build for sure, but I think it's worth it in the end, because you end up with a more loyal, devoted fan base. And I think even when you stop, if you stop producing music for a while, for whatever reason, they stay with you and they stay with your music. They become lifelong fans. So yeah, it's something that is very important to me. And I just can't write a song now unless it's really personal to me. And that's one of the reasons I don't do many cover songs either, because I'll only cover a song if I can really actually relate to it. If it means something to me, like, Song to the Siren on my last album, for example, that was the only cover song on that album. but I really related to it. So that's why I did it, apart from the fact that it's just a stunning song anyway.
Yeah, it is, and it's the way you do it as well is really stunning. But I love how you put your own stamp on things, and I think when I do covers, I do try and do that myself, because then it does make you feel like you are able to have a bit more artistry with it. Because I know we've spoken about whether to use covers or not before, and I said that I feel there is a place for covers.
Yeah, there is.
People into your world a little bit, and then you hope to hold on to them with your more original stuff.
Yeah, they're
the way I can see them.
There definitely is a place for covers, but I think you have to. The best way to do a cover, in my opinion, is to really, as you said, put your actual stamp on it and make it unique to you. Because otherwise, there's not a lot of point really. That's the whole kind of point about a cover, as far as I'm concerned. It's taking a song and looking at the bare bones of the composition and actually, showing your interpretation of it, rather than just kind of trying to emulate the original.
Yeah, you're completely right. So when it came to your first album, was that, I'm trying to figure out when you were signed to a label, because when I was signed to the label that I was with, they very much followed a path of, we do covers quite a lot of the time. And so for me to come along and go, no, I want to do my own stuff, was a bit different.
Yeah, I can imagine all the eyebrows going up at the record label. You want to do something different. But yeah,
and I did do something different. Like, I co-wrote 7 out of the 12 tracks on my debut album, but I've always thought afterwards, maybe I should have done what the label had always done and just done covers for my first album, because then they know what they're doing then, and the audience, they know what they like, what they know, if you know what I mean. So I wondered if that would have built the fan base slightly more. Yeah, I don't know. Well, you never know.
I don't know, because there've been so many since Katherine Jenkins, and obviously she was a novelty when she first appeared on the scene. That's one of the reasons she was able to really nail it and do so well, because there hadn't been another classical crossover artist really before her, or at least not a female one that I can recall. So, but the problem is, obviously, once she had appeared on the scene and been there a while, and she was doing all those songs as well, the standard kind of classical repertoire. Anybody else who came after her who was also in the same genre wasn't as novel as she was, and that's why I think none of the other classical crossover artists who've tried to follow in her footsteps, doing the same kind of repertoire, have done anything like as well as her trying to do exactly the same thing. And I think it was just down to the fact that they weren't novel, unlike Katherine Jenkins was when she first appeared on the scene. So and the public are sort of pretty harsh with stuff that they've seen before. They're just like, well, this isn't new. Yeah. Whereas somebody doing original music, that is new, because it's in its very in itself, an original song is new. So yeah.
So was it for your first album that you were signed to that label then?
No, I actually never signed to any labels. So I had 3 offers. I had an offer, first of all, from Warner's, one from Dramatico, which was the label that Katie Melua was signed to.
Oh yeah.
And one from Decca in the end. But none of them, for various reasons, ended up signed. I could go into that, but the long and short of it is basically none of them worked out. And that was 2.5, 3 years, maybe even, of my life just sort of kind of almost down the drain, really. And I wish I could go back and tell my younger, less experienced self, Lauren, you're wasting your time with these guys, just release that album. Because I was sitting on my debut album for a while. It had been finished. we did finish the last song, I think, in 2014, but I'd started work on it actually when I was at the Academy in 2010. So it had been a long time in the making, partly because I was still at the Academy, so I had to kind of fit it in around my studies. But yeah, I was shopped around the labels by all the people who I was surrounded by, you know, at that point in my career. And I just thought, because I was, you know, young and inexperienced, I recognized that, and I looked at all these people I was surrounded by, and I thought, well, you know, they've all been in the industry for years. They must know more than me. I should listen to them and, you know, pay attention to what they're saying. And what they were saying to me is, you just don't really have any chance of making it unless you're signed to a label. And don't worry, we've got lots of contacts, you know, so we'll get you signed to a label. And I also had particularly one manager who was actually a very high-flying guy in the industry, still there now, for about a year as well, and he was part of that process of shopping me, you know, to the labels. And it was actually after I parted ways with that particular person that I got the first offer from Warner's. Like I say, long story short, that one didn't get signed. They basically wanted to take ownership of my first album without paying for it. And that album cost a lot of money to have made. So, you know, unsurprisingly, the answer was no, not unless you know, you want to take ownership of that album in perpetuity, pay for it, you know. They weren't willing to do that. So, you know, that one didn't work out. Dramatico, can't go into too much detail about that one, except to say that the label doesn't really exist anymore. So kind of glad that actually, you know, that one didn't work out. And yeah, the Decca one, they offered this deal and then just never sent it, which was around about the time when I had been given the opportunity to record a song for Downton Abbey. And I just thought, you know, I've been pushed around to all these labels. I've had a manager who got me nowhere fast, despite being a very sort of senior person in the industry. I think I get the message now. I'm not going to get anywhere with these labels. I have to just start ignoring what these people around me are saying and do my own thing, and just release my debut album and see what happens. And it turned out to be, you know, the best thing that ever happened to me, because while obviously, you know, it took, at that point when I released it, I was hardly known. You know, I was a really small independent artist at the time, and also, you know, still pretty inexperienced. I had a lot to learn. I didn't have any money to promote the release. I just had to basically throw it out there and say a prayer and hope and just keep sort of, you know, slogging away to try and build things. So yeah, that was you know, I've waffled on so much I can't remember what you actually originally
No, I'm glad you're waffling on, because I'm finding it interesting. It's very interesting. So I'm guessing the idea was, if you had your debut album made already, the idea was to license it to a record label so that they could release it for you. Was that the idea?
Yes. Yeah. Exactly. Just to, precisely do that. Yeah.
Yeah, well, they do have a lot more connections, and they've got all that experience and knowledge, and they know what they're doing. But then there's certain well, how do I say this? There are great things about labels, and there are things that are great as an independent artist. So there are lots of pros and cons to each side. And it sounds like you are enjoying the pros of being an independent artist, because you said it's really lucky. It's the best thing that could have happened that those deals did fall through. So why do you feel like that?
Well, because it it forced me to have to learn everything about being an independent artist from the ground up. And that knowledge now is invaluable. I mean, as you'll know, the things that we have to do, it's not just about, can we write a good song and can we sing nicely? It's about so much more than that. We have to be not just a master of those skills, but we have to also be a jack of so many different trades, from website editing. I think I've even done some HTML editing at some point, coding or whatever they call it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Tumblr. I've done, you have to be a social media expert. I was in a webinar recently with some Facebook and Instagram experts, which was very interesting. It was about best practices for going live. Live streaming, I mean. And one of all the interesting things that they said, and very helpful things they said, they also said one thing which really kind of got up my nose, and this annoyed some. Pardon?
I'm intrigued.
Yeah, well, it annoyed somebody else as well. Actually, it wasn't just me. Somebody asked, they said, we're going to go over our FAQ, the things that we get asked most frequently, and one of which was, I'm a manager managing some smaller artists. How do we best go about building their profiles on Facebook and Instagram? And as part of the response, one of the experts at Facebook/Instagram said, we recommend that you do one newsfeed post per day and at least 5 Instagram stories. And I was just like,
are these people allowed to have any other jobs? Or
yeah, I was just like, I beg your pardon. Do you have any idea how much independent artists like you and me have to manage besides social media, which is a whole area of expertise in itself, and it's enormously time consuming, and I don't like to just fill social media with rubbish. Nearly said a rude word, but you'd have to edit that bit out. I actually sent them, to be honest. There was they sent a form afterwards asking for feedback on their webinar, and I said, great, fantastic, really helpful, loved it. But and I actually sort of just yes, laid it out in no uncertain terms that what I thought of their suggestion that you should be posting that frequently, and just sort of try to explain to them all the different things that we have to do. There's I think I listed about 10 individual things before I thought, okay, I think I've made my point. But yeah, I mean, that just sort of gives you an idea. I mean, you were saying, why do I like being an independent artist? Well, obviously, yes, there are downsides, like, the fact that we are so overwhelmed most of the time with the job list that we have to do, because it is not, sadly, just writing nice songs and then singing them.
However nice that would be lovely.
That would be lovely. Yeah, I mean, that would be brilliant if it was actually like that, but obviously it's not. We have to do a lot more than that, and it can be, I'm sort of constantly trying to walk this line between staying on top of all that stuff and trying to make the most of my career, because obviously, if I have a day where I maybe don't achieve as much as I want to, I feel anxious about that. I'm like, oh, I wanted to do, this, that, and the other, but I've only got that one thing done instead. And it does make you feel anxious, because then, of course, you look at, you go onto YouTube and you see, some artist in the same genre who's just released, yet another cover song on YouTube, and they're getting zillions of views straight away, and they seem to be all over social media as well, and you just sort of, you do feel this keep up with the Joneses sort of pressure, for sure, but also at the same time trying to kind of keep a quality of life balance, because it would be very easy for the likes of you and me to just sit on our computers and our phones constantly and be pressing all the buttons that we need to press, and before you know it, the day's over and you haven't even stood up, basically. But yeah, as I was saying, the good side is it's forced me to have to learn everything about what I need to do from the inside out, and I'm still learning. Every day I'm always reading some article or other about some new social media tool, or music production tool, or some article about the latest streaming analytics on all the platforms. I'm always still learning, and I spend actually a great portion of my time doing that. So it sort of equipped me with a knowledge that enables me to be able to make a living out of what I do, and also not to ever be taken advantage of anybody. Hang on one second, my earphones are busy trying to slide off the back of my head. So I just need to rearrange them 1 second.
No worries. Well, while you're rearranging your headphones, I feel like there's so much I could say about what you've just said, because I identify with so much of it. It's like I'm having a conversation with myself when you say stuff like this.
Yeah.
And I was having a conversation with another independent artist on Facebook. So social media was definitely a blessing for me that day, where I was talking to a lady very much in this kind of similar conversation. And she said that she used to have these huge to-do lists, and if she didn't get them done in the end of the day, she'd feel so guilty. She'd feel like she'd wasted the day, even though she was working 14, 15, 16 hours trying to get this list done. And it so severely affected her health that she had to take time off and take a step back.
And that's why I disappear from social media sometimes. Anyway, carry on.
Yeah, well, I understand. And she said something to me that has stuck with me. She said, there is always something else to do. There is always something else that you're going to want to do. So how do you best want to live your life with this unfinished list? And I thought that was really good. It's just that acceptance of, I'm only one person. There are only 24 hours in a day. I just can't do everything. So how do I want to live my life with this unfinished list? And I thought that was really good. That made me feel better about things and was quite inspiring.
Yeah, no, I'm always sort of giving myself the same reality check. I mean, while I've been up here in Yorkshire living with my parents during lockdown, I'll be sitting there, at my computer, tearing my hair out and just not moving all day, trying to keep up with everything. And, mum will come up to me and say, Lauren, any chance you can take the dog for a walk? And I'm like, oh, I'd love to, but I've got so much to do. Oh, sod it, I'm just going to go anyway. Sometimes I have to say no, but so obviously the lure of when you've been stuck glued to a computer all day, just getting up, going out into the sunshine, because it has been ridiculously sunny.
Lovely,
for most days while I've been up here as well. So yes, going out in the forest, with the dog and actually, breathing a bit of fresh air and taking a break. You have to do it, because otherwise you just go stir crazy.
Yeah, and I do find it helps just stepping away from the laptop for a bit, just do something else for 10-15 minutes and come back. I feel a bit fresher when I come back, and I'm a bit more productive, even though when you've got a lot on, you're thinking, I can't take a minute off, I've still so much to do. But actually it's a good thing when you can step back and then come back to it, and that's something that I've had to learn as well. But the other thing I wanted to touch on that you said was that you're constantly learning, and that's exactly how I feel throughout all of this. And I remember when I was releasing my second album, which was the first album that I released as an independent, I said to Rich, if I could just for one day, just have one day where I didn't have to hear about and learn and wrap my head around a completely new concept and then complete it by the end of the day, my brain would be so grateful.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, that's the thing with, I quite like doing things like, say, cooking, or, just some manual labor job that doesn't actually really involve my brain that much, because what, you and I have to do is so taxing on our brains that by the end of each day, I'm just like, there. I can hardly string a sentence together. My brain is so tired.
Yeah, fried. Yeah.
So, actually it's a relief to me to just, go outside and do something that doesn't really, like say, involve my brain, like, just go out and groom the horse or something, or muck out the field. Yeah, I have been doing that while I've been here. It's been one of my jobs.
Not one of the nicest jobs, but yeah.
I actually don't mind that kind of thing.
Oh, really?
No, it's just being out in the fresh air, and it's good exercise, believe it or not.
Oh,
and it has to be done.
It's horrible that I had to look after Rich's grandmother's horse at one point, because I'm a vegetarian, so I like to think that I love animals. This horse, no. It's not my friend.
Oh.
It's because it's broken about 5 bones in Wendy's body over the years. When she's been going out to feed it and it's done something, or it's been spooked by the wind in a hedge, and so she's fallen off and broken her pelvis or something.
Oh dear.
She's amazing. She's an amazing lady. She's 88 and still horse riding. Like, I really hope I'm like her when I'm her age. That's amazing.
Wow, that's impressive.
But yeah, I've been looking after this horse and doing the mucking out, thinking it's your own fault that that you're not out riding with Wendy now because you decided to kick her when she was feeding you an apple. Oh dear. So yeah, I'm glad that you enjoy it, but
Well, these the 2 horses my parents have, they're actually quite old now. They're brother and sister. My parents bred them, quite a few years ago when they were breeding horses for eventing. So they actually live out in the fields now. So they're not in stables in the barn or anything, but still, you have to keep maintain the fields, because otherwise, they end up in a mess. Without going into too much detail, but as going back to the original point, just doing little manual things like that don't involve my brain, it's actually a relief to me.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. I think that's why I've enjoyed being out in the garden so much with all of this going on. I mean, I originally started in the garden because it was the day after they announced all of the help for the PAYE, and they hadn't announced anything for self-employed people yet. And I was thinking, oh my goodness gracious me, what am I going to do? So I think getting out and doing some gardening, and I've got loads of vegetables that I'm growing now, it just gave me the feeling that I was in control of something.
So you're deadheading those roses really enthusiastically.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my gosh, so it was nice to have something to focus on that also then took me away from the computer. That was really good. It felt like I was in control of something when everything else had just been flushed down the toilet, it felt. So so that was quite nice. But yeah, the amount of things that going back to talking about lots of different things that we have to do, one thing that I never expected that I would have to do as a singer would be looking over legal contracts with instrumentalists that I employ, and things like that. So I've learned quite a lot about music law so that I can write my own contracts. And then
me too.
Press releases, how you do press releases and send them out to people. There's tons of things, as well as talking about law stuff. You've got all of the royalties and stuff that you have to register correctly to make sure everybody is paid correctly, and there's a lot of lawyer speak that goes on with that. And when I was first starting, I was like, is this English? because it does. I don't understand it.
Yeah.
It's like a whoosh kind of steep learning curve having to figure that out. And it's all stuff that you have to do as an independent, because you have to make sure that all your ducks are in a row.
Yeah, you do, because your income comes from so many different places, in rather than, you know, a couple of sources and they're big chunks from each source. It's lots of different sources, and, you know, a trickle from all of them. And if you don't, especially as an independent artist, obviously make sure that everything is properly registered with all those places, all those little trickles of income just won't trickle in. And, you know, the result is obviously you can't pay your bills, and you just can't sustain a career.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think when I'm at a concert and I sell my CDs afterwards, people say, oh, which CD should I get? And they ask me. It's like asking me to choose between my children. I don't know. Not that I have children. I can imagine it would be like that. But when I say to them, well, this one took 2 years to make, and they look at me in disbelief that it takes so long to make an album. I'm like, well, that's quite a quick turnaround.
Yes.
So I guess that people just don't realize all these other things that go into it, and all the other things that you've got to prioritize to make a record. It's not just recording music and getting it out there.
Yeah, and that's why.
Great, but
yeah, I mean, I actually try to. You know, obviously, as a public figure, you have a responsibility, which, you know, I take seriously anyway, towards people who are following you. And in my case, you know, I know that a lot of the people following me are younger people, and many of which are aspiring to have a career in the music industry. And there are a lot of influencers out there who promote this kind of impression that, you know, all they have to do is just turn up. And I'm not actually talking just about singers here, I'm talking about influencers in general. You know, they give this impression that, you know, they literally just sort of have to turn up, have some pictures taken, and go, and then it's as simple as that. And actually, obviously, you know, the reality is there's a lot more going on behind the scenes. And, you know, some kids just, they get this fake impression from social media of what certain careers actually entail, and they just don't have a realistic idea of what the actual reality of that career is. So I think it's important, you know, when you're a public figure, to try and put some of the truth out there without necessarily, you know, putting everything out there. Like, today I was doing HTML editing for Tumblr, you know, because everybody's just like, they're just not interested. There's obviously, you know, some detail that you have to kind of leave out, but you know, every so often I will say something on social media, just, you know, saying about some of the reality of actually what's gone into doing what you and I do. Because I think it's important, you know, for any aspiring young people who are following me to know that it's not just as simple as you turn up on stage with a big orchestra and you open your mouth and sing. And also, you know, for my fans to appreciate as well, you know, just what goes into doing something like making an album of mine. And I have had quite a few comments from fans saying, I just had no idea, you know, that you had to do that. Wow, you know, I appreciate your music now even more. So yeah, I think it's important to kind of put that stuff out there about the reality of, you know, having a career like ours.
I completely agree. And I know that you've had a lot of experience not only getting your own ducks in a row, but you've experienced somebody else not getting their ducks in a row, and and the craziness that ensued afterwards. So somebody used your song without your permission, didn't they?
Yeah, they did. I'd actually never heard of them before, but it turned out they were pretty famous. Some rappers called Migos, who a couple of years ago now, or hang on, where are we now? It was back in 2017, I think. They sampled my song without permission. It was a song from my debut album, Carry Me, that they used. And for several months after they had done this, I was unaware, because obviously they hadn't come to me and asked for my permission. And I kept seeing these comments on that video for Carry Me on my YouTube channel, just saying random things in isolation, like Migos, who obviously I'd never heard of, so I didn't pick up on that clue. Or they would quote a section of the lyrics from the song that those rappers made, or they would just say the name of the track that these guys had sampled my song into, which of course I had never heard of either. So I didn't pick up on those clues until somebody joined the dots for me on my Facebook page and wrote a comment. They said, I was really surprised to hear your vocals in that song by Migos called Too Hottie. And I was like, hang on a minute. Who are Migos? What's Too Hottie? And what have they done with my song? And I then went straight to YouTube, typed Too Hottie Migos in, and found this video that they'd released with this track.
How did you feel when you found it?
Astonished. First and foremost, I was just like, because that video had at the time about, I think it was 34 or 35 million views, and it had only been released for 3 months, I think, by that point.
Holy moly.
And then I went straight to Spotify, and it had a similar amount of streams there too. And then I just looked up Migos in general and realized they were absolutely huge. And so whilst doing this, I mean, my jaw was basically like, as I was looking at all of these figures, I just could not believe that this had happened. Obviously, there was a little bit of sort of, how dare they, feeling about what they'd done, mainly just because it felt like there was an arrogance about what they'd done, that they'd just thought, she's tiny compared to us, she'll never notice, and even if she does, she'll never be able to challenge us.
That's infuriating.
Or they're making so much money they just didn't care, whether I noticed and challenged them on it anyway. But I did notice, thanks to that person connecting the dots for me, and I did challenge them on it, because I own the master of the song that they sampled, and I was also half of the songwriting. So it actually took over a year to negotiate both the master and the publishing settlement. Yeah, it was, and I had to really, really hold my ground, and push hard, and it gave me a lot of sleepless nights, as you can imagine, dealing with these high-powered lawyers from Universal, which was their distributing label.
I thought Universal would have got their ducks in a row with it.
I dare say they were probably unaware of what Migos had done until I came knocking on their door and said, yeah.
That's me.
Yeah, and I mean, there was no denying it either, and they didn't even try to deny it, because the sample was so obvious in the song, and it was looped constantly without a single break right throughout the whole track. And it had also been reported in the likes of Pitchfork, and some other big music industry publications who had specifically commented on the sample and how it flavored this track, and who the sample, where they got it from. So there was no denying it, and they didn't even try to deny it. But we had to fight hard to get a fair settlement, and part of that was them crediting me as well for the sample, which they wouldn't normally do, I don't think, for a sample, but obviously in this case they had to, because it was something I asked for, and it was the least that they could do for me. But I actually had if you look on YouTube on especially their track, and sometimes, on my video as well, I actually get, not many, admittedly, but a few sort of nasty comments from diehard fans of theirs, saying, "Oh, lol, dat beep," force them to credit her. Ooh.
You wrote the blinking thing. Of course, you should be
Yeah,
credited.
yeah, but they were just sort of diehard fans, and they kind of objected to some little independent artist who was more classically orientated, making them credit me because they sampled it without permission. But
I don't
whatever.
understand
There's
stuff like
always
that.
going to be people out there like that, aren't there? So
Oh my gosh.
whatever.
Well, you
Just
wrote
another
it.
thing
Of
that we
course, you
have to
should be
deal with.
credited. Like,
Yeah.
I don't understand people like that at all. Like, imagine if they'd have created something and then somebody had stolen it to use it and profit off. Like, how would they feel?
God, they
Like,
would have come down on me like a ton of bricks. I mean, if it had been me sampling on one of their songs, yeah, ooh, big
yeah,
trouble.
exactly. Goodness me, I can't believe it must have been so stressful. I was trying to think about how I would feel if I'd have heard something like that and if it had been going on with me. I think I would have felt violated and yes, that was very rude of them to do that. But I think I also would have felt quite excited at the same time, and it's also a bit of a compliment. So it must have been like, oh,
Yeah, I mean, obviously it wasn't all downside. There are, of course, plus sides to what they've done as well. So actually, I look back at that and see it as one of the better things, that's happened in my career. So I'm certainly not complaining about it. Obviously, I would always rather somebody do the proper the proper way and ask for my permission. And I'm always, I mean, Migos aren't the only people who've sampled some of my songs without permission. It's happened a lot, mainly because I've had some high-profile Dutch hardstyle DJs. It's kind of dance music for those who haven't heard of it. I hadn't before these
I was
guys
about to
came
say, I'm
along.
glad you clarified because I hadn't either.
Yeah,
That was helpful for
yeah,
me.
no, I'd never heard of hardstyle either until these guys came along. But it's kind of dance music, and these guys are very high profile, and they've sampled some of my songs as well. And it's, of course, there's all the sort of younger, aspiring DJs who have listened to their music and thought, oh, her music's good for sampling. And I found one release they'd actually released it in the stores, and retitled it. And it was actually one of the guys who sampled, or well, they're a duo, they're twins, Soundrush. It was actually them who told me. They said, oh, by the way, have you heard this track? They've sampled your song City of the Dead. Do you know about this? And I was like, what? No. And looked this track up, and sure enough, they'd done it and they'd released it, and I think it's been out for about 6 months. And annoyingly, it had ended up on CD as well, which, once CDs are made and sold, that's it. There's no getting that back. Streaming something on a streaming platform, you can pull down, and that's it, it's gone. But something on a CD that's in somebody's home somewhere, I can't get that back. And the problem is that I wasn't impressed with what they'd done with my track. I didn't like it. They weren't well-known artists either, and the whole thing about it just didn't reflect well on me. But anybody listening to that track and what those artists did with it would have thought that I sanctioned it, and possibly even that I had some creative input into it, and therefore thought, that it reflected on me. And actually, no, the reality is I had no idea these guys had done that. And so I'm constantly having to sort of clear up things like that, people sampling my songs without permission. But like I say, it's not all bad, because it turns out that something I would never have anticipated at the beginning of my career would have been that people sampling my songs would be a thing, even, and that not just, you know, a small thing in my career, but actually quite a significant part of my career. And actually, you know, that is the case. It's become quite a significant part of my career. So overall, you know, sampling of my songs is actually, you know, one of the more important things in my career. Yeah.
Yeah, and in some ways it can be absolutely brilliant if you like what they've done, and if you feel like it's reflecting your brand and your artistry in a good way, but as you say, if it's not and it looks like you've endorsed this, then obviously that's very tricky. But you said that it can be great for your career, and I thought that was a good way of bringing us around to something that you mentioned very briefly earlier that I really wanted to touch on, which was Downton Abbey. Because for me, that's been such a blessing for my career, and I'm so grateful that I'm involved and I sing on the track. But I'd love to hear more about. Well, I'd love to hear you talk more about your story with Downton Abbey, because you very kindly told me before. But I'm quite happy to hear it again so that we get everybody to know the great story that goes along with it. Because I am so grateful for Downton Abbey, and it's actually how I first heard of you, even though we're in very similar genres or the same genre. I heard about you through Downton Abbey because I saw your name on a CD that I was on too. So that's how I first heard of you. So of course, when we met together in London at the amazing pancake place, I of course had to ask you about
from that.
Oh, it was amazing, wasn't it? That's my favourite place in London, I think, is the pancake place. But yeah, I'd love to hear you share that story again if you're happy to.
Yeah, of course. So I went to an event back in 2015, I think it was, September 2015, called Games Music Connect. And that was an event aimed at soundtrack composers wanting to get involved with the video game world. And I went there because I, you know, really wanted to get into the soundtrack world as a singer. And somebody at a previous event had recommended, you know, I should go to this event. So I did. I turned up and I watched, you know, all the panelists speak all day. And I thought, you know, I've got to pick one of them because they'll all just be inundated at the end of the day with people wanting to speak to them. So, you know, which one am I going to pick? I've got to choose one. And I went for this guy who, for some reason, I thought he was more to do with music publishing. I'd somehow kind of missed the fact that he was first and foremost an agent representing various different soundtrack composers, some very well-known soundtrack composers, including John Dunn, of course, you know, the Downton Abbey composer. So I went up to this guy during the queue and finally got to the front and was sort of saying my little piece, you know, to introduce myself. And I could see he sort of looked a bit defensive probably because he had had to speak to about 30 people or so before me. And I just happened to mention I'd been to the Royal Academy of Music. And, you know, suddenly his eyebrows, oh, hello. I kind of saw the eyebrows go up and the arms unfold. And I thought, I've got his attention. He said, oh, yeah, well, I went there too. And I was like, oh, yes, connection. I've got him. Anyway, you know, we had a little conversation, and he said, well, nag me in a couple of weeks' time. I'm just going on abroad for a couple of weeks, but I'll be back in 2 weeks. Nag me then. So I did. You know, I sent him a message when he got back, just said, hello, just nagging, you know, as you asked me to. And a few emails later, he just said, well, how do you fancy recording a song for Downton Abbey? And I was like, I mean, bearing in mind I was...
Let me think about that for a minute.
Yeah, I'd just been through the record label mill and not got anywhere. And, you know, I was in that decision process, a phase at the time of, do I release my debut album by myself independently? And, you know, then he offered that. And as you said, I was kind of like, yeah, let me think about that. Go on then, you know, if I really must. And then, once I'd done one song, John said that he wanted one of the other songs that had been recorded by another artist, previously re-recorded. And I said, oh, you're looking at me. He said, I'm looking at you. I was like, oh, okay then. So I recorded that one as well. So yeah, that's kind of how that happened. And the whole soundtrack side of what I do, which, as you know, is a very significant part of my career now.
Yeah.
Went from there, because after that, I then went on to work with, did a song for Disney Nature on a film called Born in China, with an 85-piece orchestra, which was incredible. I then worked with Nicholas Hooper, who's done 2 of the Harry Potter films. I did something bespoke with him for a lady who was competing in the Rio Paralympics in 2016 as a dressage rider. And she actually won gold with that routine. So that was lovely to see on TV, her riding and my little voice singing out on the TV.
That's incredible.
That was a lovely moment. And I then did something else, a film with him later. And after that, I've worked with Benjamin Wolfish, who's a huge composer now, soundtrack composer. And I did a film called Shazam with him. I recorded 3 solos, and quite a bit of other vocals within the score too. And more recently, I recorded, did some solos for another film with. Oh, is that your dog?
That's my dog. I'm sorry. It's because there's a postman walking up the path.
Oh.
And he likes to let us know about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he's having a good bark now. And the doorbell's rung. That's it. He's going to be excited now.
Oh dear.
Bless him. He's a good guard dog. He does a good job. I've actually seen people trying to sell windows come up the path before. And then, of course, as he sees them, he's barking his head off. And he runs and jumps onto the door and puts his big paws on the door. And I've actually seen people turn around and walk back down the path and not actually knock on the door. I'm like, good boy.
Yeah.
Such a good boy.
Oh,
yeah, bless him. He's doing a good job. So if you're happy to put up with the barking in the background for a little bit longer.
That's all right, don't worry.
Looking down because I can see the front of the... Yeah, there we go. He's going. We're all right. Mr. will calm down soon. He's doing a good job of his job. He's a good boy. Yeah, okay, I think we're safe now. I think we're good.
Cool.
But these are all massive things that you are doing. It's absolutely amazing. Yeah. I hope you don't mind me being a little bit curious as to what your working process is with that, because obviously your voice is so stunning, and I love how you layer your vocals. I absolutely love that. So if you could tell us more about the creative process when you're working with a composer like that and you're working for a film, what kind of happens?
Well, I mean, usually with soundtrack work, the vocal parts are pre-written, by the composer. So rarely does a vocalist get hired in the soundtrack world to contribute anything in terms of actually writing material as well. I mean, I think, for example, an artist called Ivor did something with John Lunn for The Last Kingdom, and I think they actually did. She contributed writing material as well as her vocals for that. But as far as I know, in the soundtrack world, that's not all that common, really. And usually the singer is just hired, to be a voice, basically. So yeah, I just, I mean, I can record from home remotely. So the majority of the time with the soundtrack work I've done, that's what I'm doing. I just get sent the music and have to get familiar with it and then record it and send it back. But it's pretty much always on a really tight turnaround. So it's high pressure usually. And I mean, when you're doing music, some of it's sort of, not too taxing in terms of the sight reading and everything that's required. But the music that I was given by Ben Wolfish for Shazam, however, was whoa. I was glad that I had all of the training that I've had, because there's no way I could have handled that music if it wasn't for that. I mean, the time signatures in some of the sections of that music were changing every single bar, you know, from and not just, you know, more simple time signatures like, you know, 3/4 to 4/4 to 2/4. It was more like, you know, was it 5/17 or something was one of the time signatures I saw in there. Yeah, like really, really bizarre things. Going from simple time to compound time, and let alone, you know, the notes that I was having to sing as well. He writes extremely complicated, sophisticated music, and yeah, that really stretched me. Doing the vocals for that film in particular. But I mean, one of the best experiences I've had soundtrack wise, apart from, of course, the Downton Abbey songs, and then performing in that concert at Highclere last, gosh, it's about a year ago now, coming up to a year ago.
It's quite scary how quickly time flies sometimes, isn't it?
Yeah. So aside from that amazing experience, the last soundtrack project I did, it was done actually just before the lockdown was announced, and I had to go back into the main hall at Air Studios, Lyndhurst Hall, which is, I don't know if you've ever been in there, but it's huge and absolutely stunning. And I hadn't sung in there before. So I wasn't quite sure how it would feel to sing in there physically and what the acoustic would be like, but I had a feeling it would be pretty amazing. And sure enough, it was. I'd been in there last time, you know, for recording my last album in August, last year. So I had the orchestra and choir recorded in there for my last album, but yeah, I had to go and stand in the middle of that big hall on my own with all the executives sitting in the control room to sing these solos. Yeah, some of which were, I mean, there were some top A's in there, but which is, you know, for a soprano is quite a comfortable note. It's not too high. You know, I've sung higher, but the way that these notes were written and the way the composer wanted them recorded was like triple P and sustained, you know, held really, really quietly for a very long time, and trailing off even more, and even more with no vibrato. You know, that was the request. You know, try and actually no, he did on this particular note that I'll never forget having to record. It's just like, can you do a little swell at that point and expand the vibrato a little bit at that point and then bring it back in again and then tail off? And I was like, okay.
Thank goodness for classical control.
Yeah, no problem. You know, and then sort of Julie had to try and you know, deliver this vocal. So, but I mean, you know, singing in that hall was an amazing experience. So yeah, most of the time I'm recording from home, as I said, but just occasionally, you know, I have to go into a studio like a Lyndhurst Hall and record for soundtrack projects as well.
They must really, it just goes to show the trust that somebody has in their vocalist when they can give you such specific examples of what they want and instructions and know that you're going to deliver it. And that's often really nice, because when I've had requests like that, it then does make you feel good when you deliver it, doesn't it?
Oh yeah, I mean,
like
you know, I'm always
like, yes.
Yeah, I'm always quite kind of anxious, you know, and I've sent something off like, oh, they're going to be happy. And, you know, so the relief, of course, you know, if they write back and say, oh, yes, you know, thank you so much, great job. Because, you know, in the soundtrack world, it's pretty sort of cutthroat. You know, if you can't do what they want, they'll replace you, you know. usually when it comes to soundtrack work, can't say soundtrack work, I'm not being hired as Eurielle, really. I'm being hired as a session vocalist. My name, my profile, for the most part, is irrelevant, and I'm just being hired to deliver a voice and some vocals. And and the simple fact is, if I can't, meet the job, meet the requirements, then I would just be replaced.
Well, it goes to show your
that's
talent
just what it's like.
Hasn't been replaced. They love you.
No, fortunately, so far I've never been replaced. But
and for good reason.
It'll probably happen one day.
No,
but,
no, it won't. So, did all of these
soundtrack
things come from meeting that guy when you plucked up the courage to go and talk to him afterwards?
Yeah,
that's
pretty
brilliant.
Much. Pretty much all of them have come via that company and meeting that guy. And obviously some of the composers he represents have heard of me because of, they follow their peers, their fellow composers' work as well, and have asked about me as well. But yeah, it's all sort of started from that one meeting with that guy, and him offering me the chance to do that song for Downton Abbey. Yeah.
That's absolutely amazing. There's so many times when I've spoken to young musicians who are trying to get into the industry and try and make a living and try and make this their job. It's like you were saying earlier, how you feel like you need to be truthful as to what's involved when you're speaking to people who want to choose this as a career path. But the one thing that I really try and hammer home is you've got to put yourself out there and not be afraid to just try these things and meet these people. And you never know what's going to come of it. So I think that I love it when I hear stories like that, where somebody is really empowering themselves, even though it's scary. And even though they might feel like, oh, why would you want to talk to me? You've still got to go and do it. And it's just so important to do that. And so I love stories when, like, you've gone and done that and look at what it's led to. It's amazing. It's just really inspiring.
Yeah, I've been, I mean, thank God I picked on that guy, because I could have easily picked on any of the other panelists and gone up to them instead. And, probably, much of what I've done in the soundtrack world wouldn't have happened if I hadn't picked that particular person to speak to. So, yeah, just maybe a little bit of fate involved in there. I don't generally believe in fate. I think you sort of make your own luck, really. But sometimes, I think things happen for a reason, and maybe, some force guided me to choose that guy rather than any of the others.
Yeah. No, that's really brilliant. And I love that we can add an inspiring note into this podcast. And I'm just so grateful that you were happy to come on, because when I first met you and when we first got to talking, I couldn't wait to ask you so many questions, because you've had such a great career and you've experienced so many great things. And I love talking to proactive independent artists, which you are just the embodiment of. It's amazing. So I'm so happy that you could come on and share your story on the podcast, and that you've had time to come and speak to me. And I just I'm sure that a lot of people will really enjoy listening to this. So thank you so much for joining.
I hope so.
Absolutely brilliant of you. And
My
I hope
pleasure.
you've enjoyed it, and I've enjoyed looking at your background and your piano. It's making me think that I need to try and get a piano of my own one day. I have to do that. Well, thank you so much again, and I will look forward to speaking to you again soon.
Thank you too.
Thank you.
See you. Bye. Bye.